Hello to everyone. Thank you all for joining me at this time. My name is Shavi Zane, and I'm coming on to bring a message forward. I've been receiving a lot of spiritual uploads, okay? And so I definitely feel that this message right here is something that needs to be known, especially by the chosen, the 144,000. Um, we are now in the time of the awakening, as you all know, and so many of you are aware of the fact that you are chosen. Um, and some of you may still be lingering as to whether or not you're chosen. But at this time, I feel that most people who know who they are in this time of awakening, the first thing that you awaken to is who you are, okay? And so most of the chosen recognize that. Um, this particular message that was given to me is in regards to the enemy siphoning energy of the chosen by using strategic measures on a spiritual level. Obviously, he's using it, the enemy is using it on a physical level. But I want to talk to you all about the spiritual level, the strategic agenda of the enemy siphoning energy from the chosen. So it was so many different things that was coming in to me that I had to really try to break this down in a way where I can present it to you all and you'll be able to take this in and utilize it to strengthen and empower you. So I'm just gonna work with it. However, the message comes through, I'm gonna give it to you all. So please bear with me because it's a lot of information. First, I want to start off by saying that in terms of siphoning energy, one experiment that I remember in school was where they showed how potential energy works. Okay, now potential energy potential energy is I don't know why I didn't even put down this particular definition. Let me give y'all the specific definition of potential energy so that I don't butcher it, okay? um, but this is what is used in order to do this particular experiment that I remember in school, okay? Potential energy is the energy held by an object because of its position relative to other objects, stresses within itself, its electric charge, or other factors. And so the example that was given here was of, I'm not very well skilled when it comes to this thing of, whatever. I'm just going to use my phone here. But the example that is given is this car that is driving upwards. This car right here, it contains the energy. It needs the energy to go uphill, okay? So it's going uphill. This car up here contains the potential energy. This car that's going downhill is releasing the energy. So this car possesses the energy. Once it gets up to the top, this is the potential energy that it has gathered as it went uphill. And then as it goes downhill, the energy is being released, okay? And so it doesn't take as much energy to go downhill as it does to go uphill. And that's why you need more energy than when you get to the top. You contain all of that potential energy that you drew in while going uphill. So what does this mean spiritually? Okay, consider that those of us who are chosen, we literally was in this position, just like the cars that I just showed you, an uphill battle against forces, unforeseen forces, some that you could see and some that you couldn't see. Uphill battle where you was fighting against these forces, resisting these forces, climbing this steep hill to get to the top, doing whatever was necessary in order to keep yourself focused on the most high, which is that high vibrational energy, staying connected to the source, right? In spite of the resistance, because this car that is going uphill has to push up against the resistance that might cause it to go back downhill, okay? And so we had to push against the resistance, those external factors spiritually and physically surrounding us, the chosen, in order to get to the top. So here we are at the top, right? We got all of this energy. This is our potential energy. This potential energy is what gives us the driving force to determine which direction we'll go. What are we going to do with that potential energy being at the top, okay? Because you want to be able to stay in that position. You don't want to go backwards, okay? Because this card doesn't want to end up going backwards. It doesn't. And if you're going to go forward, you want to make sure that you're going forward in the right direction, because that energy that is being exerted as you go back downhill after you have gained all of that potential energy, as you go down this hill, going forward, you want to make sure that you are exerting that energy into the right direction, okay? Because downhill can look like going downhill literally in terms of your emotions, your mental state, the way that you perceive life, the way that you perceive yourself, or it can be you heading into a new direction and using that potential energy to propel you forward to where it is that you need to go. So in the spiritual realm, okay, when I looked up siphoning energy deals with, let me show you all the particular experiment so that you can get an idea. Because siphoning energy is two tubes, okay? This is what they showed. It was two tubes. Let me see. A siphon tube. Okay, this is a siphon tube. It runs from one container to another. So you have two glasses here. From one container to another, and you put liquid in one of the containers, right? So the container that actually holds the liquid is the one that is placed higher. Okay, so the container that is placed up on top of something, they sit it on top of something higher, and then you have the other container that has to sit on a lower surface. So you have one that's sitting on a higher surface and another container that's sitting on a lower surface. And the one that's higher contains the liquid. The one that's lower is empty. But in between these two is a siphon tube. So they might use something, some sort of tube or like a straw or something like that. And it's going to have, be placed in this part of, the tube, the container that's sitting lower, and the other part of the tube is going to be placed into the container that's sitting higher, but inside of the liquid, right? So spiritually, water means emotions. So let's just consider this. The enemy who naturally sits lower, because the enemy is low vibrational in its energy naturally, right? Has been able to obtain power through siphoning the energy of those of us who naturally sit higher in the spiritual realm. We contain the spiritual gifts. We contain the wisdom. We contain the knowledge, the understanding. We contain the soul. We contain the direct connection to the source, the Most High, right? So we sit higher in the spiritual realm. The enemy has been able to create in the spiritual realm a tactic to drain the chosen of our gifts and our energy. This was a strong tactic that was used before the awakening. So let's see. When we talk about this, I'm trying to find a good example in terms of photos here. This is good. So we are seeing here, this is an example of siphoning, a siphoning tube, and it's taking this container sits higher. This tube was empty, but is actually receiving the liquid from the container that sits higher. And so to explain this, the only way that the container that is sitting lower can receive the liquids from the container that sits higher is if the tube already contains, this tube has to already have liquid in it in order for this experiment to work. And so it's actually going to use the energy of gravity. So let me tell you what all was here. The siphon tube runs from one container to another that uses gravity to cause liquid to flow. You must use force to start the initial flow, which would be the force that's within the tube itself. That would be the liquid that's in the tube itself that connects one container to another. So using force, that would be a connection in a spiritual realm from the chosen to the enemy. There has to be a traumatic event, force, some sort of trauma, okay? Because when I hear force, I hear some sort of trauma, right? There has to be a traumatic event that's actually going to allow for the enemy to have a direct connection spiritually to the chosen. From there, you must use force to start the initial flow, but after that, the gravity then begins to take over. And so after this trauma, this force is used, then from that point on, gravity takes care of the rest. And so there's no force, no excessive force that's needed from that point on until eventually this tube, this container, which sits higher, which would represent the chosen, is completely drained, and the enemy, which sits lower, is now, its cup is filled up with that same liquid or that same energy that the chosen possessed. Now keep in mind that when I showed you the example of the cars, that potential energy is what they are siphoning, because we did all of that work to overcome traumatic events, to heal and to gain victory, to finally be at the top, okay, of that hill that we've been climbing since the time that we came here for lifetimes, okay, because this is a generational thing that has happened here. And then once we get to the top, the agenda of the enemy has been to take that same potential energy, and rather than us being able to use that potential energy to propel us forward, the enemy steals that potential energy, because again, you have to be above this container, has to sit above this one in order for this experiment to actually work, in order for the siphoning to actually take place. And so we get above, we sit higher. This is all of the potential energy that we have gained. The enemy has to have an umbilical cord to us. And so in this tube is already water, because it needs the gravity in order for it to siphon the energy from one tube to the other. So in order to take our energy, it needs to have some sort of emotional connection, because again, water stands for emotions. And so it's that energy of finessing the chosen. That's what the enemy did. And you see that as being a pattern for these people who are in so-called authority, right? They come in, they pretend that they have good intentions. Prime example would be here on this land with the Native Indians. Come in, you pretend you have good intentions, you work in, you get the favor of the people, you get them emotionally connected to you, right? So the water in the tube that needs that potential energy, the water in the tube is the emotional connection, right? They create this emotional connection, but the ultimate goal is to steal and to drain all of the energy from those who have a higher connection to the divine, to the Most High God, right? So in order to gain their power. And so they siphon the energy on a spiritual level. This is what the agenda and the goal has been. Okay, let me see if there's anything else. Okay, so siphon. Siphon is the process of emptying one container. The process of emptying. One container must be higher than the other. The higher container possesses more potential energy. The higher the container, the more potential energy. That's what it says. Let me say that again. The higher the container sits, the more potential energy it possesses. So the higher we raise our vibrations, the more potential energy we possess. Now the question is, what are we going to do as a collective with the potential energy? Because we have been climbing this hill for a very long time, overcoming the obstacles that wanted to push us backwards, push us back downhill. The enemy wants to be able to take, now that we have awakened and we know who we are, we're stepping into our power. The enemy wants to try to harness that energy by first creating some sort of cord connection through emotions, creating a trauma, because you need the force in order to start the initial flow. So to create a trauma, that will then allow the enemy to siphon the energy. This is on a spiritual level, but it also manifests in the physical. And so on a spiritual level, he wants to be able to siphon that energy, okay? This is why we have to take our power back, because we are continuing to create potential energy. As we all continue to rise higher and awaken to our gifts, awaken to our power, awaken to our potential, the enemy is trying to figure out, how can I steal that energy? Okay? That's one of the concepts behind selling a man's soul, because the soul is the direct connection to the source, which allows you to be the co-creator of your life, because you are working alongside. To co-create is to work alongside that of the creator. And so the enemy understands that we've been given the authority to do so because we are children of the Most High God. And so the enemy understands in the spiritual realm that because we are awakening in this time of the reveal, the time of revelation, we are climbing up to the top, okay? We're all gathering there at the top, and that's all of that potential energy that can be used for us to take it and propel us forward in a new direction, okay? And so this took me into, I used to play chess, okay? I haven't played in a long time, so you know what they say, when you don't use it, you lose it. But I played chess, with one of my ex-partners. I used to play with him all the time. And I was pretty good at it, okay? So I had to go back in, being that I haven't played in many years. I had to look up the chess game and the actual positions and what the objective is and all of these things, okay? What each piece does and all of these things. That when I was receiving these messages, that game came into my mind, okay? And what I was able to come into understanding is that in the spiritual realm, the enemy is using the game of chess. That is the strategy that is being used over the chosen. And in this game of chess, let's just talk about chess. So the objective of the game of chess is to checkmate the opponent's king. Okay? The objective is to overpower the king. Once the king is off the board, the game is over. Okay? The king is the most valuable player in the game. The queen, however, in the game is the most powerful player. Now you might ask, well, why is that? How does that work? Well, obviously, the king is the one who's going to be over the empire, right? The king, every kingdom has a king, okay? And behind the king or beside the king is his queen. And then you have everyone else who works alongside to keep the kingdom or the empire intact, to keep the structure intact. So you have kingdoms, you have the spiritual kingdoms, you have the physical kingdoms, right? And so we're talking about the spiritual aspect of the enemy's strategy. Using the chess game, okay? The king is the slower moving piece, okay? The king can only go forward or to each side, okay? It's not so many moves that the king can make by itself. The king is a very slow moving piece on the board. However, the queen embodies the energy of the bishop plus the rook. Now, y'all, just bear with me because I'm going to be able to bring this all together towards the end. If you're not familiar with the chess game, this might make you want to go play chess or make you want to look into the game so you can understand the strategy. But I'm getting to it. Just give me some time here. The queen actually is able to it can combine the energy of the rook and the bishop, okay? That's why the queen is more powerful, because the queen on the board is able to possess moves that other pieces can make. The king can't do that, okay? And so the queen, let's talk about the bishop, because the queen can combine both the energy of the rook and the bishop. She can make moves that the bishop makes, and she can also make moves that the rook makes, okay? The bishop is the religious structure. The queen has direct access in the chess game to the religious structure. Now, what does that mean? We all understand at this point, because if you go back and look at my video, I feel like this will maybe guide you to go and see the video that I made about Christ being a ritualistic sacrifice. The queen, like I said, embodies the energy of the bishop and can make moves of the bishop. So the bishop is the religious structure. The religious structure is very powerful because it has a large influence over the masses, as you can see. If you can get, which that's the strategy that the enemy has used to get the mass majority, especially the chosen, to follow a specific religious structure, to pray to a specific created God, to follow a traditional pattern from one generation to the next, and it's largely led by the women in the home. Most of the time, the woman in the home is who actually creates the foundation for the religious system, because it is the mother that will likely be the one that's going to say, okay, I'm going to take y'all to church this Sunday, and we're going to, it's the mother who's going to go out and make the decor. She's going to decorate the home. So if you see a white Jesus hanging up on a wall, it's likely the mother, the matriarch of the family, who has placed that there, okay? The mother, the feminine energy, is the one who will pray and use that as a healing mechanism to maybe heal her family, or to pray over her family in hopes that it's going to resolve whatever trauma they have been dealing with. And so the woman of the family, the mother, is going to be the one that embodies that energy of whatever the religious structure is, the dominant religious structure is that's in place in history at that time, okay? The king, the man of the home, may be more resistant. That's why you find that most churches, most of the members that are there are women, okay? Because the feminine energy is more connected spiritually, okay? Because water, when we talk about water, I told you water stands for emotions. The feminine energy is actually that, has that, because we have more water. Just think about it. The female actually is comprised of more water physically. And so emotionally, we have a more available connection to the spiritual realm, because we have intuitive messages that come in. That's why they say the woman has the intuition. Not saying that the men don't, but we have a stronger potential to connect than the masculine energy. And so the queen is able to combine the moves of both the bishop and the rook. Now, the rook is the second most powerful piece right behind the queen. So the queen is the most powerful piece on the chessboard. The rook is the second most powerful, right behind the queen. Okay? Now, the rook, aka the chariot, which the chariot actually stands for that potential energy, okay? The chariot is almost like the car, right? Because that's what the chariot was known for. It would be like a horse and buggy that would carry people where they needed to go. So the chariot is the potential energy that's going to carry the kingdom in the direction that it needs to go. And so the queen possesses the potential energy as well as the religious or the spiritual connection. This is why the queen is so essential when it comes to the enemy. The feminine energy is so essential to, it's an essential part of the enemy's agenda to overtake the queen, the feminine energies of families, in order to, if the enemy can overcome the queen and keep the queen or the feminine energy bound to a religious structure that goes in opposition to her nature, or keep her bound to a potential, a specific direction of movement or a focus, okay? Because that potential energy is the movement that takes you in the direction that you need to go. So the enemy knows that the queen possesses the ability to have the potential energy as the rook, as well as the religious, spiritual connection as the bishop. And this is why in chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. And so the woman is used largely and manipulated largely by the enemy because of her emotions. And because her emotions is largely what tends to drive, to be the driving force of the feminine energy. Not saying that that's a bad thing, but it can be used to your disadvantage when you don't understand how to direct that potential energy as a queen, a goddess, a feminine energy within your kingdom. Okay? And so this is why when the enemy comes in, the objective is to take out the king, because once the king is taken out, then what do? They make the females, the women, the concubines, and they rape the women. They give them their particular structure, their religious structure, their political structure, and that's how they overtake the kingdom. Take out the king, then you can control and manipulate the queen. And the queen, because the queen has that direct connection to the chosen queens. Now, we're talking about the chosen feminine energies have that direct connection to the Most High where we receive these messages. It makes it even that much more powerful in the spiritual realm for the enemy, because in order to siphon the energy, let's get back to siphoning the energy, the enemy really wants to siphon the energy of the feminine chosen, those who are feminine chosen seeds, because we possess that divine connection. And so to overtake the feminine energy, first of all, to take out the king, to remove the protective structure or the most valuable of the kingdom, which is the king. That's why it's called kingdom. The most valuable is the king. To first overtake the king by using fear tactics, because the king, this is how they use fear tactics for the king. The king can only move, it only has but so many places that it can go on the chessboard. So the king can go forward, backward, left to right, if I'm not mistaken here. But the king can't jump like the chariot can, because the chariot will come in and the chariot can actually jump places, okay? Because it has that horse to get up and go. So that the chariot is the rook, right? Yes, the chariot is the rook. And no, hold on. I'm sorry, y'all. Hold on. We didn't talk about the knight. So wait a minute. The chariot is not the one that can jump. The knight is the one that can jump, okay? So we'll talk about the knight in a minute. So the king can only move but so many places, and so he's the slowest moving player on the board. Mainly because I think the enemy sees the king as not having that direct divine connection, even though it is definitely very much so present for the chosen masculines. Absolutely. But the feminine energy, I feel, receives more of the intuitive messages that kind of can give the king guidance on, like in the background, because they say behind every man is a strong woman. Behind every powerful man is a powerful woman. And so the queen's position in the kingdom is to give guidance. And when those messages come through, she's able to direct and guide and give maybe warning or healing or instruction to the king, who then takes his wisdom, matches it and pairs it with that of his queen, and gives directive based on that knowledge, okay? So the enemy is after the masculine. Once you reach that potential energy, you've gone through all of these things, you've overcome all of these traumas, you've raised your vibrations, you know who you are, you're standing in your power. The enemy's agenda is to come in and to completely wipe out the masculine energy. This is why when we spoke about in scripture, when the king at that time that was after Christ, Yeshua, killed all of the male babies, okay, from ages 2 and under, used his authority to go and kill all of the male babies because the masculine, it was anticipated that a Messiah would be born through the lineage of the Israelites, okay? And Yeshua was ultimately that, okay? But Yeshua was one of many ascended masters. He was potentially the most powerful that we know of within this part of history, okay? But there are many ascended masters because, again, Yeshua reminded us, greater works than me shall ye do. So he was telling the Israelites, he was telling his fellow brothers and sisters that there would come from my wisdom, or from Christ's consciousness, there would awaken many who would do greater works than me. And so we are here. Christ's consciousness has awakened. And so in the background, the unseen, in the spiritual realm, the enemy wants to be able to siphon the energy, to zap all of that potential energy that you have been able to create to get to the top from you through traumatic events. Because remember, you cannot siphon the energy until you have a trauma first. So then it led me to, I don't want to be all over the place. I want to finish talking about, let me just finish that sentence real quick, because I want to get back to the chess so we can finish talking about the game here. Trauma, right? Trauma is usually a traumatic event. It can happen on an individual scale, or it can happen globally, okay, on a mass scale. A deeply disturbing experience is what a trauma is. In the physical, it could be a rupture or a blunt force, which is what we was talking about in terms of beginning the process to siphon energy. You must first have force to start the initial flow of siphoning the energy from one thing that sits higher to something that sits lower. And so the enemy now knows that we have we're moving towards our potential energy of being at the top. And so it's up to us at this point to determine which direction, how we're going to use all of that power that we have within us and behind us to propel us towards creating the kingdom. Okay? This trauma bonding, what I heard was trauma bonding is, so we know that the word bond is a connection between two people or two surfaces joined together by means of adhesiveness. So two people, some sort of adhesiveness. We go back into this connection is the siphoning tube, okay? That's the enemy's connection. The enemy sits low, we sit high, full of all of this wisdom here. His cup was empty, and so it needs that connection. It needs to already possess that water, so it needs to have some sort of trauma bonding, some sort of event that's going to make the chosen trust the enemy. So this is where I feel this is what's coming here, because the enemy knows that we are creating the kingdom first within ourselves, and then ultimately we come together as a group consciousness near and far across all four corners of the earth, no matter where we're at, as a group consciousness in the spiritual realm. We create the kingdom there first, and then it manifests in the physical. So the enemy wants to meet us in the spiritual realm. He wants to direct our potential energy and determine that potential energy takes us downhill, but in the direction that the enemy wants us to go in, not in the direction that we are being guided to go in, but in the direction that actually benefits the enemy. Okay. And so this is where we have to come together in our potential energy. We have to now know what to do with this. We have to know how to direct our path to create the kingdom, because this is where the enemy wants to come in to drain that potential energy in order to gain its power and its strength. Okay? And so trauma bonding is one of the methods that is used in the spiritual realm. So how can you trauma bond in the spiritual realm? Well, through the religious structure, okay? If the enemy can somehow get you to have some sort of, because I told you all, the enemy is using black magic, the enemy is using spell work, the enemy is using everything possible in the spiritual realm, okay? So some sort of situation to get you to feel maybe at a crossroads in terms of your spiritual path. If the enemy can get all of the chosen back into the religious structure and back to worshiping and acknowledging a white Jesus, which is his God that was placed on this pedestal in order to create, using the energy of the chosen feminine to direct her connection to the Most High, but it cut off the divine feminine's connection to the Most High, because the divine feminine, her prayers were going towards a white Jesus, whether she wanted it to or not. When you close your eyes, because there's so many visuals of white Jesus all the way across the board, there was a time where people didn't even believe, the majority did not believe that Christ, Yeshua, was a black man. And so the enemy cut off your connection in the spiritual realm and cut off your gifts of being able to hear and to be able to see through the matrix and to be able to listen to your intuitive wisdom as the feminine energy, by giving you its religious structure, its false illusion of God. And then it took the potential energy, which the queen possesses the ability to use to be the rook on the chessboard game. It took the potential energy and directed the feminine energy. And so wherever the feminine goes, that's where the masculine ultimately winds up, okay? Especially because the masculine has been overcome and defeated spiritually, okay? Which means that the masculine has been emasculated. The masculine's power has been stripped from him, which is the same analogy of Samson, whose hair was cut, okay? His hair, because Samson, we know, had locks, okay? We're talking about dreads, locks. That's what the scripture says. He had locks. Samson's locks was that divine connection, okay? And even when we go into talking about, like, say, for instance, in terms of the melanated people here, okay? Melanated chosen here. We have coiled hair. Our coiled hair grows against gravity. And coiled hair, it grows out just like the tree limbs do, okay? To reach for the sun, to reach for the light. And so it's like antennas that we have. This is why they wanted to push perming our hair, straightening our hair, chemically processing our hair so that we don't have that divine connection, okay? Because the hair is coils, antennas that gives us this divine connection to everything that exists, okay? And so it's that energy of, for the masculine, the king, stealing the power from the masculine, making him more feminine in his energy through the Jezebel spirit, largely, because that's one of the ways that the enemy has been able to manipulate in the spiritual realm, is through the Jezebel spirit. So that particular witch in the spiritual realm was able to siphon the energy of the masculine, the chosen masculine, through sexual energy, through sex magic, through the Jezebel spirit. Okay? Okay? Emasculating him, taking his power away. And so this is very obvious what the strategy is in the spiritual realm, because all you have to do is look at history in terms of what they did in the physical. What did they do in the physical? They emasculated the black man by cutting off his genitals, hanging him, killing him in front of his queen, okay? Killing him in front of his queen, taking his children from him, raping him, forcing him to rape others in order to, as they would call, I can't even think of the word, but they treated them, treated us as if we were animals, okay? In order to, breed, right? Okay, so forcing him to have sex with other family members, okay, to do all types of things, okay, and so took strip the power from the masculine, the king, and you completely tear down the kingdom itself. That's been the agenda of the enemy, and it has been effective because we have been asleep to the strategy. But now, in this time of awakening, nothing can be hidden. So let's keep going. So we talked about the king, the rook, the queen, the knight. Now, the knight is the warrior. The knight is very powerful and very dangerous, okay? Because the knight protects the empire. The knight is the one that can jump pieces on the board, okay? So it can jump just like a game of checkers, okay? It's the only one that can jump on the board, okay? So the knight, again, is the warrior. Now, this would be that person or those of us as a body, because this is a whole body here. We're not just talking about individual. There's a whole body. The warriors are the ones who are what the enemy would like to call the rebels, what the enemy would like to call the threat to society, the menace to society. Okay, we have a lot of knights within our kingdom. I feel like these will be those people, especially within. I can speak on the black community. Okay, I can't speak for everybody. I can speak for the black community. Okay, melanated people, those who have that aggressive energy, who are very territorial. Those would be the knights, okay, of the black community, gangs. Okay, but the problem is the enemy has caused the energy to be directed in the wrong way. So we end up, the enemy has spiritually taken that power and controlled the warriors of the body of the kingdom to go up against one another rather than the actual enemy itself. That's how they manipulate in the spiritual realm, like, puppet masters, okay? But because we can't see that, because largely the intuitive wisdom was zapped right out. Why? Because the queen of the kingdom, which is the feminine energy, no longer has been able to receive, or at that time was not able to receive the spiritual messages that said, no, I have to heal myself so that I can begin to heal the kingdom and awaken my king again, to heal my king, because the queens, the feminine energy, possesses the healing energy. And so as long as you keep the queens asleep, then they produce knights who have all of this aggressive energy, who are naturally the warriors of the kingdom, the protectors of the kingdom, but they misdirected, that the energy is misdirected to go up against one another versus against the enemy itself. And so they control this, they use this, the agenda is to control the knight. The agenda is to control the religious or the spiritual connection of the queen, to control the potential energy that the queen possesses to direct and to guide the members of the kingdom into the right direction. The enemy's agenda has been to overcome the masculine energy and to completely wipe out, because again, the entire objective of the chess game, you win once you actually checkmate, once you actually remove and get the king off the board. And so the last one, let me see. We already spoke of the bishop. The bishop represents the church, and the bishop is always close by the king and the queen. So the bishop is the third most the third most powerful piece on the board because of the religious influence. The bishop is the one that possesses the religious influence. And when I look back, a lot of these cards that I have here, it talks about the Hierophant, it talks about the knights, it talks about the chariot. Okay, you have the chariot card. All of this was placed here. Everything was happening right up underneath our noses. But because the religious structure said, don't go seeking, you must stay within this box. You must stay within the confounds of what we are telling you is right. Because otherwise, if you don't, you're going to go to hell. You're going to be ostracized by your family. You're going to be told that you are a devil and that you're a devil worshiper and that you are a witch and that you are this and that and the third. When in fact, these were key pieces to show you the strategy of the enemy in the spiritual realm. Because in the physical, the eyes, okay, when it comes to being able to have spiritual insight, you cannot see and understand what's happening in the spiritual realm when you are completely disconnected from the spiritual aspect of yourself. The spiritual aspect of you is completely asleep or is being directed towards a God that is an illusion, that is meant to be a stumbling block to keep you from the true connection to the Most High. You cannot awaken to what's happening around you in the spiritual realm if you are disconnected from the spiritual aspect of yourself. So what happens is, while we're able to see, okay, this government is not right. Okay, racism is not right. Okay, slavery was not right. Okay, well, them trying to overcome and tell us, and mandating us to do XYZ is not right. But you can only see it from the surface. You can see all of these things that's not right. There was a time where people couldn't even see that part, though. That's how asleep we were up underneath the spell and the dark magic of the enemy, up underneath the illusion. But now, over time, as people begin to awaken out of sleep, you still got that crust on your eyes and you're still trying to get that blurry vision so that you can see straight. Now people are starting to see, okay, the first part of the illusion is to awaken to all of those things around you in the physical realm that just ain't right. But then as you continue to awaken and reconnect with who you are on a spiritual aspect, then your spiritual eyes open. And then it's like, oh my goodness, I see how this has played out in terms of how it's spiritually affected us as a whole, as group consciousness, and how the enemy has been able to infiltrate and to overtake and to gain power over the masses using the strategic plan in the spiritual realm of playing chess over your lives. Okay? And so now that we know, okay, because we have to speak on the pawns, right? So the pawn is the last piece. The pawn is also known as the peasant, the foot soldier. The pawn is dispensable, okay? So who would the pawns be? The pawns would be those people who, when you speak of separating the wheat from the tare, the pawns will be those people who were strategically placed around you, surrounding the chosen. That could be your family, your friends, your lovers, your co-workers, business partners, religious structures, governmental structures. But it's on a smaller scale because the pawns is representation of the peasants and the foot soldiers. So the wheat, separating the wheat from the tare, these are the ones who will never awaken. These are the ones who create contracts in the spiritual realm to stay in that low vibrational energy, and they're here to do the work of the enemy. And so the chosen end up finding themselves surrounded by many pawns who are being used. I don't even know if they know it in the physical. Their understanding are being used as a slave or as a puppet by the enemy, which and ultimately will be disposed of, right? They're going to be thrown into that burning furnace. Ultimately, they're going to be disposed of, but they are being used because they decide not to heal. They decide to stay in that low vibrational energy. These are the ones that ostracized you. These are the ones that made you feel like the black sheep. These are the ones that told you was different. These are the ones that put you down all your life or that created stumbling blocks in your life. These are the ones who literally put dark magic over you. Okay? Used as pawns to siphon your energy or to create obstacles towards the chosen, because it always has to be someone who is close to you that's able to get direct access to your energy. And then the enemy is laughing at these fools, these pawns, because ultimately they're going to be disposed of because they're seen as peasants and they're foot soldiers. The enemy uses them, manipulates them. They are walking zombies, and so they go right along with the agenda, okay? and they are jealous, they are hateful, they are spiteful, they do all of these things to create stumbling blocks for the chosen. And so the goal is to lower the energy of the chosen so that the enemy can ultimately siphon that energy. Okay? So the pawn is the one that is dispensable, that will ultimately be cast out. They did their job, right? But the pawn, while they thought that they was actually bringing you down, chosen, those people that was surrounding you, friends, family, like I just mentioned, whoever these people are that you had to walk away from, because you begin to awaken to the spiritual nature of these people. You begin to see past the veil and to see the spiritual nature of these people using your discernment. You cut them off. They were the ones that was actually giving you the fuel that you needed to get up this hill, to climb up this hill. So now we all possess this potential energy. What are we going to do with it? The question is, what are we going to do with it? Okay? Let me just pull real quick to see where this potential energy is going. And then I'm going to close out because I feel like that's the message, y'all. This is going to lead me into doing another message, which I'm going to be talking about how to awaken your spiritual gifts. Okay? But now we have to come together collectively to determine. We can no longer sit back and use our power and our strength to manifest material wealth, love, a good job. I want to manifest. No, we have to use our potential energy as a collective, as a group consciousness, as Christ consciousness to create the kingdom. That is what we have been put here to do. So the feminine energy can be in the energy of healing the kingdom, healing our kings, healing our warriors, okay? Healing all of those who are a part of our kingdom, okay? Healing our bishops, those who are here to bring the messages forward, the spiritual messages forward, healing our queen, healing ourselves first. And the kings have to be stepping into their power, taking back control, establishing their authority, knowing who they are, stepping into their strength, and putting the energy out there that all other kings are now cohesively coming together to create a solid foundation, becoming the protector, the provider, the leader, okay? This is what the king should be doing. And so our potential energy, where is our potential energy right now? This is what we need to know as a collective, as the chosen. Where is our potential energy right now? Because remember, this is what the enemy wants to try to steal. And so the enemy will try to create stumbling blocks using those pawns that's surrounding you to zap out your potential energy, siphoning the energy of the collective, not just of individual people, but of the collective. Okay, because we all work in unison. So look at this. The potential energy that we're in right now, our kings, we're stepping into our power, taking back our authority. So this is not just the kings. This is the masculine energy. The emperor is the masculine energy. The women and the men both possess masculine energy. So that means that the women should be taking our power back, stepping into our authority, establishing our freedom in the spiritual realm, coming out of this energy of grieving. So now that potential energy, remember I told you going uphill, all of them tears that you had to cry as you continue to run that race up that hill. Now we're at the top. We're sitting on our throne. We've released this grieving energy. This is where we're moving to if you're not there yet. We're releasing this and getting our power back, okay? And so I strongly suggest that with this potential energy that we all come together and light candles, writing on the candles with a Sharpie, I create power, authority, strength, wisdom, knowledge, understanding. I create freedom in spirit and in flesh, in sleep and awakened state across all timelines, realms, and dimensions, known and unknown. Now, I know that seems like a lot, but you can figure out a way to write tiny and get it up on that candle. If you have to get you a long pillar candle from the dollar store, do that. Write that on there because, see, when we establish our authority, remember the enemy's agenda, the strategy is to create the stumbling block in the spiritual realm first. because the enemy understands that we have awakened to our power. We know who we are and we possess that potential energy. And so he wants to zap it right up out of us. Okay. It's not going to work. So now we collectively come together. When we light our candles, when we pray, when we send this energy out into the universe, we are deciding where we want to direct our potential energy. That's where it's going to go. Okay. One more card in terms of our potential energy at this time, and then I'm going to close out. Okay, so I have two of them here. So we have the Nine of Swords here, and then we have the Knight of Cups. So in our potential energy, this is the same type of concept. Moving out of this energy of grieving and moving into this energy of love, okay, and emotional balance. Getting up out of the bed, getting up out of sleep, waking up out of sleep, coming out of this energy of depression and taking action as the knight. Remember, I told you all, this says the Knight of Cups. The chess game, one of the pieces on the chess game is the warrior. The knight is the warrior. The knight is powerful and dangerous, and the knight also protects the empire. So we need to be preparing our knights, placing the energy out into the universe. I create protection, I create strength and power for the warriors, the protectors, the protectors of the kingdom. I create strength, I create freedom, I create healing, okay, for the protectors of the kingdom. So we have to heal the hearts of the knights. Okay, because we have knights out here, we have our warriors out here who are hurting, who are in pain. And so in that energy, I told you the enemy manipulated in the spiritual realm so that the warriors, our protectors, go against each other and create havoc for one another rather than directing that energy towards the enemy itself. And so we now send healing energy out for our protectors, our warriors of the kingdom, so that now we know we are directing our potential energy the way that it's supposed to go, the way that we are being called to direct it versus the way that the enemy wants to try and control it. So that's what I got for you all. I love you. If you want a private reading from me, you know you can always email me. Thank you all for the donations. Y'all have been so generous to me. I just want to tell y'all thank you, and I love you for that. Okay. And the likes, the subscribes, the messages that you all leave me, I'm always humbled. Okay. Always humbled. And so this is why I'm going to continue to stand in my purpose and stand strong. It's not about the numbers. It's all about the influence. Am I empowering you? Are you awakening? Are you stepping into your strength? Because we have to do this together. So I love you all, and I'll talk to you all next time.